Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to the live stream. Game week 4 is coming upon us. I'm actually only going to stream today until around 9:45 p.m. AM, UK time, just because I have a kick about to play. But I am going to stream a little bit to answer your questions for around an hour. So let's just start with Sam Taylor's question. So he says, would you take a hit to take out Nico to Perisic? Otherwise, you have to play Nico or Andreas this week. I probably wouldn't take a hit for Perisic. I'd probably actually think about just playing Andreas simply, unfortunately, in that situation. I think the reason why I wouldn't take a hit is because if I take a hit out for Perisic, and Perisic is your 11th player, kind of worried about what happens next week because Perisic could be rotated, and you might be looking at needing to take, wasting another free transfer in essence for Perisic, or someone who plays in that position. So I'd actually rather you go for someone who potentially could play a little bit more than Perisic over the next few weeks, and that just might mean a cheaper centre back from, let's say, Brighton, or someone like Saliba from Arsenal. So that could be the way to go. Unfortunately, I just don't like Perisic because of how that affects your Game week 5 transfer. And I don't know what your team is like, but certainly if you're a Haaland owner or something like that, you do need to think about how your transfers are going to move in the future. Christoph, good morning. Hope you're doing well. Notorious, thoughts? Good morning, Nuisance. Morning, Dober Sanchez. Adds, morning, Fran. Rolling the transfer this week to counter possible rotation. Yep, understand. Definitely thinking Kulu to Harrison fixtures and a falling Neto to Gross or someone else. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Obviously, Neto makes sense to play this week if you've already banked in the kind of loss in cash, and unfortunately at 5.3 there aren't many options available. Gross does have good fixtures himself. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of Gross. Obviously he's not on penalties. What I don't really like about Gross is, as I've said on the cheat sheet too, Brighton do share a lot of the offensive burden. I do want to see what happens with, let's say someone like Purvis Stupinian, whether he actually plays consistent minutes going forwards and how that affects the Trossard position. Just because that's quite interesting. And then at 5.5 too, once that Liverpool game is over, Almiron's an interesting option at 5.0. And we have some other assets in FPL that could shine. I'm not as high on Arison as people are. I think he is slightly overrated as a 5.5 asset, mostly because he scored versus Chelsea. He's probably someone who's similar to Gross, is going to get assists quite consistently, but as far as goals like Gross did in getting the brace versus United, I'm not really sure. As far as Andreas or Da Silva, I'd probably start Da Silva just because the fixture's so good on paper. It's still Everton and Brentford are playing at home. Fofana an option now at 4.4. Is he actually 4.4? I thought he was a 4.5 option. 4.4, man, that's incredible. He's absolutely going to be an option as soon as he signs for Chelsea. I'd probably even think about even downgrading James potentially. It just really depends on whether James plays right wing back. We'll see what happens there. And obviously I could just downgrade. So if let's say I was to downgrade Luis Diaz into Gundogan, and I didn't really want to touch Haaland, or let's say I wanted to move Haaland to Kane, I would begin to start to find some money back into getting Fofana, which would be a huge upgrade from Nico Williams. So we'll see what happens there. Triple captain Salah, I wouldn't really triple captain. I think triple captain is a chip that you could probably hold until the double game week fixtures come up, and that's going to be later in the season. It's not worth. I know it doesn't seem like it's worth the wait, but you will definitely get more dividends out of it. Your rank will be probably a little bit lower than you expected, but saving your chips to the later parts of the season where you actually have more opportunities, I would say, to get more points. So saving a free hit, for example, for a good double game week, saving a triple captain. Those are the times when you actually see your rank rise long term. Considering transferring Cancelo for Perisic to fund Tony and Rodrigo next week, you already have Walker / Cucurella, Trent, and James. If you really want to go for Perisic, I can understand, but I do think that that's a lot of short-term upside that you're trading for someone who I think is a proven asset. And I know Cancelo is someone who hasn't necessarily been as interesting week on week as in the previous season, when he was constantly creating opportunities, but I still think he's a bonus points magnet. And as far as Cancelo, I just can't see the value of going into Perisic, who you might need to find someone else short term. If you can go for Tony and Rodrigo this week, it would make a little bit more sense because you have the upside of someone like Tony, who is the Everton fixture. If we look at someone like Tony, for example, I don't really like going into him after the Everton fixture because I think this is the crucial window where you want to get Tony. I think the next good game is going to be Leeds because Crystal Palace away is going to be a very tough match for him. And by the time you're at game week 6, I mean, you probably already have 2 free transfers, and therefore you'd already have thought about some other moves. So this is another interesting window to get Tony, especially if you're wildcarding around 8/9. But if you're wildcarding at 9, you'd still have to deal with Arsenal. And it's weird. It's a weird kind of time to go to Tony if you're not going for Tony this week. As far as going into someone like Rodrigo next week, that's totally fair enough because the fixtures actually are quite good all the way until United away. And I'd probably back that transfer a bit more. But for Cancelo to actually leave your team, I think that just puts you in an even tougher position. If Cancelo, let's say, gets a clean sheet in Crystal Palace, he's continuing to be nailed. I mean, I don't see myself getting Cancelo out of the team until, let's say, potentially the Spurs game. And we'll see what happens there. I understand you have Walker. And I guess that's also based on you banking on Cancelo not getting very consistent points because he's maybe not playing so well in the 5-3-2 from an FPL perspective. But I don't think the gamble's super worth it. Ake to Dunk, a good transfer. Yeah, I think so. Hey, Fran, you got to check Twitter soon. I will do it in a bit, Brandon. Is Mount, Iverson, and Nico Williams to Rodrigo, Saliba, and Sanchez that's actually a pretty decent -4. What I don't really like on paper, though, is that you're dropping Mount. If you're forced to play Nico Williams this week, then I can understand the -4 because I don't see the value of really playing Nico Williams. And then, to be honest, like Rodrigo, Saliba, Sanchez does set you up for the future. What does feel a little weird about the transfer is obviously Mount has probably the best fixture on paper out of all 3 of the incoming transfers and all 3 of the outgoing transfers. So that's one thing to think about. I'd say if you have an interesting bench option, maybe avoid the hit. But if you are forced to go out of Mount so that you can afford this team, you could do that. Some short-term upside is also Rashford too. What do you guys think about Rashford versus Rodrigo in general? That's also another opportunity you can play around with. But I'm going to quickly move on to Twitter now. So yeah, I mean, this person actually has the exact same question. So he was asking just what happens if you can't get Rodrigo now at 6.4? And to be honest, I think the simple answer is just going for Rashford. That is actually a pretty fire team from this guy's girlfriend. O'Brien. Tempted to go from Saka to Ganoa and 1 free transfer. Should I roll or? I think I'd roll, especially since I do back the Arsenal fixture versus Fulham over City versus Crystal Palace, even though Zaha's injured. So Brandon's got a pretty intricate lineup, yet early DM, fair enough. My current starting 11, bench will be Ward, Nico Williams, Andreas, and Archer. Yeah, strong team though. Robertson to Perisic and Archer to Tony. What are your thoughts? So I guess this gets rid of Bailey for us for this week, which I do feel a little bit at odds about because I do quite like Bailey. I don't really like Robertson. Yeah, I don't like the Robertson transfer this week. I do think Liverpool are pretty close to getting a clean sheet. In fact, from the gambling odds, we actually do see that Liverpool have the highest clean sheet percentage and probability. So that's why I don't really like the transfer. But then burning the transfer also doesn't feel great. So you did talk about your bench. Oops, sorry. What you could do, I suppose, is you could burn the transfer and then just go Archer into Stansfield. Because I do agree with you. I think Robertson and Bailey both have good fixtures. You've banked in basically another Bailey price fall, as far as I'm aware. I think he dropped overnight again. right? Yeah, he dropped overnight again. I would actually probably think about just playing this team. I like the team. Everyone has a home fixture. It's a very good home fixture. And you might want to save those 2 free transfers for the next week when you can actually deal with someone like Haaland, so on and so forth. I'm just thinking when I compare Robertson to Tony, who's I would say the key comparison here when it comes to how your team's going to operate. I think it's similar. Perisic versus Bailey. Obviously, Perisic has a little bit more upside there, but you also have to consider the value of actually saving 2 free transfers in your team. I would actually probably just go Stansfield. So Archer to Stansfield, get another playing bench player in your team, strengthen the team through that transfer, and then just think about your 2 free transfers going forward. Deliberately, I suppose, attacking on Bailey and maybe even Haaland, or even let's say Robertson if you are no longer interested in it, because the next fixtures could be Newcastle, which is going to be quite a tough game. Heyo says De Silva, Diaz, and Kane to Salah, Rodrigo, and Planche, or Robertson, Diaz, and Kane to Saliba, Salah, and Tony. All right, anytime you can go into Salah is a good move, in my opinion, and I think that's probably what anyone would suggest. To go out of Kane to go into Salah doesn't feel the nicest. I'm not sure I'd like to go out of Robertson this week. So I'd probably... Oof, that's tough. What's interesting actually is the team works quite well as it stands. I probably would move out of Robertson or Diaz, but it wouldn't be this week. And I think the unfortunate thing is Salah is the best captain this week, potentially. So that's kind of what hurts the most, I suppose. That Salah's such a good captaincy pick. But is it actually worth the -4? I think that's the real question. And potentially my answer would be no, because I'm looking at your team now. Yes, Kane plays away from home, but he is playing versus Nottingham Forest, a team that has posted very, very bad defensive numbers. I probably would actually just captain Kane or Jesus. And I probably wouldn't spend a transfer on Salah. What I might do actually is try to find some more money from this team and think about another type of transfer that you'd like to book in the future and maybe do that now. Something simple. I would actually do a very, very passive transfer. And I'd probably think about going Salah a week later. It's just because, for me, De Bruyne has a good fixture. And I think he's actually future template as well. So if you're moving out of Kane, I would probably do it on the West Ham game as opposed to the Nottingham Forest game. Alternatively, of course, I think people do really like the Fulham captaincy on paper for Kane. But the way Fulham are playing, I think they're actually quite a solid team. So if you'd like to go into Salah, I guess it does make sense to shift on to him maybe next week instead, because Kane has such a good Nottingham Forest fixture, and potentially I'd be less interested in going out of Kane versus West Ham. It's a strange one there. If I really had to pick between one of these two decisions, I'd probably actually go out of option 1, because I don't really want to go out of Robertson and Diaz. So it's either option 1 or passive transfer. Passive transfer being someone like De Silva into a 4.4, weaken the team, or Archer into Stansfield, and then strengthen the bench like that. So that's an option. Let's have a look at Carl and his post. Does Joe Gomez start? Robertson may be a differential against Bournemouth. I mean, Robertson's absolutely a differential. I'd still prefer Trent, though. I did show the offensive numbers between Trent and Robertson, and Trent is still outperforming Robertson by quite a heavy bit. Obviously, both haven't really found their way onto any sort of FPL scoring, but I do think going forwards, you are going to see Trent outperform Robertson, at least in the short term, based on form. As far as Joe Gomez, you've already punted into him, so, I mean, that's fair enough. I didn't like the performance from Joe Gomez, to be honest, but he could start. Have you already booked this transfer? I'm sorry, by the way, Simar Singh, I missed the donation whilst I was on Twitter, but the best captain between Perisic, Tony, KDB, Haaland, I'd actually probably go for Haaland as my captain there in that situation. I'd probably vice captain Tony if those were your 4 captaincy options. So Haaland first, then Tony. Adam Lynch, you didn't notice Neto dropped 0.2. Yeah, I know. It's pretty depressing, actually, the fact that a lot of us started with Bailey and Neto, and that they've dropped so significantly. Not the best of situations, unfortunately. You've got to bench one of James, Zinchenko, Walker / Perisic. What would you do? I'd probably bench... Man, I'd probably bench Walker in that situation. I feel like Walker's ceiling is the lowest out of all of these players. So that's why I would be going with that transfer. I don't really see many weeks where Walker would get triple bonus points, whereas all the other 3 players I can. So that's kind of how I'm justifying that. I know Zaha's missing, but that's what I'm thinking. Maybe James potentially has the lowest ceiling, or even Zinchenko, because I would say Leicester and Fulham at their best could score. But Maddison out for James is such a huge boost. And then with Zinchenko, as I said, I do think he's got a higher ceiling. So I'd either make it between Zinchenko or Walker. Strange to actually have to bench one of them, though. Who else are you playing in your team that would force them to be on the bench? Jesus or Kane captain? I'd probably captain Jesus if I'm being honest. You're considering moving from Haaland to KDB, leaving you with the front 2 of Jesus and Tony. I mean, that's perfectly fine. How do you feel about Salah to Bailey? I don't know. Are you captaining Bailey this week? Odegaard? Odegaard's a great move, I would say. I would probably only think about moving Odegaard if Arsenal got another winger in the team and Martinelli's minutes were starting to drop. So that would be when I would think about Odegaard as an option. By the way, guys, if you guys are new here, do consider subscribing and liking the video. So thank you guys so much for joining. Let's see. Ake and Neto to Rashford and Dunk. That means Andreas on the bench too. I like those transfers, J-Wavy. FPL Diamond, yeah, I do back the transfer. Shaq on the bench, that's fair enough. You can turn him to KDB and rid of Haaland. Yeah, I think that's a good transfer. Then you can also free up another Arsenal spot in the future. Maybe even think about going into another player. Should I captain Jesus or Salah? I'm on Salah captaincy. Jesus vice for me. So that's how I generally feel about those moves. Diaz to Rashford, is this a good idea? Honestly, no. I think Luis Diaz is a fantastic fixture this week. I think Bournemouth are one of the weaker teams in the league, especially when it comes to how they're facing up versus some of these, I would say, top teams. So Liverpool, yes, obviously struggling slightly with some of the forward strength, midfield strength, especially with Darwin out. Midfield is a little bit more forced because of injuries, and then defensively the same situation there with Matip and Konate being out. But I just can't see Bournemouth really getting a good result versus Liverpool, especially at Anfield. Knee-jerk this week to bring in Foden and Diaz for Pereira and Son from -4. I mean, I don't really like going out of Pereira. I think he's one of the best bench options in the game. But going out of Son makes sense. I'm not sure if I really wanted to go into Foden this week in particular. But if you are someone who likes playing aggressively in FPL, I can't stop you from doing that. I would probably say it wouldn't be the greatest of ideas. I also think that, especially when we look at those defensive numbers from Nottingham Forest, it does seem like it's a great game for Son on paper. And even though Son has shown poor form, there's a lot of history to say that Son will actually recover and that he'll do well. So that's my kind of thoughts on that. Maybe you would have got it right, though, if let's say Son was actually rotated today. Is KDB really worth 0.4 more than Haaland when Haaland is on pens? So we saw Mahrez on pens, actually, in the Barcelona game. So that does affect Haaland, for example. Whether Mahrez plays is actually another question. I do think Haaland will actually be on pens because Mahrez is not going to play. As far as KDB versus Haaland, I think the question is not just whether the 0.5 is worth it, but also if you look at some of the forwards, they're really well priced this year compared to the midfielders. So the comparison is actually, is someone like Tony worth the 0.5 more that you'd lose with another midfielder that you're forced to go into that's cheaper? So I think that's a question to ask. I think Tony is a really well priced asset as an example. Mitrovic too, going forwards. So on a KDB template, it's arguably the case that you get more value in your team because you have another really well priced forward who's really efficient compared to another midfielder who around the 6.5 range might not be as consistent as a Tony or as a Mitrovic going forward. So that's, I would say, the question to ask. I also think KDB will get more minutes than Haaland. Whether that actually matters is a separate question. I think I'm more than likely going to stick with Haaland over the next few weeks, to answer your question. So I think it's actually quite balanced, but I am more leaning towards the side. I agree with you, not just because of penalties, but because Haaland's expected numbers are so good that I'd like to keep Haaland. My favorite midfielder from Brighton, it's going to be Trossard, unfortunately. Gross is cheaper, but I don't love him. Rolling my transfer this week, Clyde says, then think you're moving from Cancelo, Haaland, Luis Diaz to Perisic, KDB, and Darwin. That's very aggressive. I'd probably want to see at least one more game from Darwin. Let's say, see what happens, whether he plays instantly versus Newcastle, before I actually thought about moving to Darwin. But I can understand wanting to move out of potentially Cancelo and Haaland. As I said, I do think it's actually quite balanced, and for a hit, I'd probably not think about that. Liam says, hi, Fran. Looking at my team, I want to do Gundogan. He is a rotation risk, but I don't think a significant rotation risk. I do think we'll see actually Gundogan play very consistent minutes in that kind of second forward position. So Kane in for Haaland or Cancelo down to Perisic next week. I do like Cancelo down to Perisic next week if we got news that Perisic would start. But I'm actually more in the camp that I think if Perisic starts this game week, then I think he's actually going to miss the next one. You had 2 free transfers and 3 Arsenal players, so you took out Zinchenko, Coutinho, and Bruno Guimaraes for Perisic, Martin, and Harrison. Look, I actually like a lot of those transfers. I think Bruno Guimaraes was never really an FPL option, and Coutinho for sure. Not the best, because Aston Villa have really tough fixtures, so I think those are good transfers on paper. You had 2 free transfers and 3 Arsenal... sorry. Hey, buddy. Hey, Zodiac, how are you doing? Is Ederson worth his price? In my opinion, yes. Obviously, Walker is another option that's a little cheaper and is arguably nailed for Man City. But you can never really question Pep rotation, and I think Ederson is therefore insulated from Pep rotation and also cheaper than someone like Ruben Diaz. Best midfield out of Gundogan, Zaha, Harrison, Rodrigo. Well, Zaha's injured, so I'm not going to really consider him in the discussion. If Zaha was fit for the next few weeks, I'd probably consider Zaha the best option. Then I'd say Rodrigo, then I'd say Gundogan, then I'd say Harrison in that order. Even not even considering price. I'm just considering efficiency there. Nuisance is it's the rotation risk with Haaland. KDB is estimated to get the second highest points behind Salah for the next 5 game weeks. Then Haaland, Kane, Son. I agree with that, but obviously you do have to factor in that 0.5. So it's quite a balanced question, Diamond. You think Sanchez will play for Spurs in the back 3? I actually need to kind of pay a little bit more attention to that because I'm not really sure. Let's have a look at what Paul O'Keefe is saying with the predicted lineup. Maybe he's going to actually suggest something. Doesn't seem like he has. Interesting. Look, honestly, I'd like to just see what happens with the Romero news. Doesn't even seem like, okay, Romero, Spurs. Yeah, I'd say Sanchez is good to go. I mean, if Romero is still injured and still not playing, then I think that's the right thing to do. Yeah, I mean, Diamond, to be honest, the 8 million midfielders have probably disappointed FPL managers more than anything. So I would actually say that it's a good move because, simply put, Tony and Mitrovic are going to last us a long time in our teams. So I don't really think that moving into the forwards, triple forwards, is going to be bad. Thank you so much, Notorious. Really, really appreciate the donation. Thank you for the support. Did you have any other specific questions? Firmino or Wisa? I mean, I think they're both terrible options, if I'm being honest. Cucurella and Cancelo or James and Walker / Diaz? I think I like Cucu. Look, honestly, I might like Fofana and Cancelo in the future. If you can avoid going out of a Chelsea player this week, or let's say if you're a James owner, I'd probably like James, Walker, Diaz for now because I like James Walker and I like the extra money in the bank to play with. However, I think Fofana coming in the future does beg the question of what we'd like to do. But yeah, honestly, Notorious, thank you so much for the donation. I really, really appreciate it. Do let me know if you have a question, though. Would you ever consider freemium? Not on the current pricing structure in FPL. I think we have too many good options at the 6.5 to 7 to 8 million price ranges that you're missing out on when you're going for a freemium structure, that it's not really going to be worth it. Bro, Notorious, honestly, thank you so much for the donations. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. The eye test on Almiron was really good. Yes, he actually is, I think, ninth in expected goal involvement across the entire of FPL. So that is exactly why Almiron is an interesting 5.0 option. So what I would say is after the Liverpool game, he's definitely one to consider because he probably allows you to cheapen your team a little bit more. And it's going to be a huge benefit to you to actually move into, let's say you own Rodrigo now, or you own some of the defenders, because we're going to get such cheap options like a Fofana in the future, or even like Almiron. We will have a lot of upgrades to make. So let's say if we want to go back into the 8 million midfielders at one point in FPL, then that's probably our best option to do that, with options like Fofana and options like, let's see, welcome brother, keep up the good work, thank you so much. High Rock says, hey bro, my team right now, Jesus, Haaland, Luis Diaz, Cancelo, Ramsdale, Martinelli, Gross, James, Alex, Salah, and Walker. You're thinking of removing Diaz for getting in Rodrigo and Perisic. You have one transfer, please help. Look, I wouldn't go for Rodrigo this week. I would go for Perisic if I had one transfer this week, and I would want to do that. The reason why I've gone for Rodrigo is for the long term. I think Rashford is actually a better free transfer this week when it comes to the short-term upside, because I like the Southampton game much more on paper than Rodrigo versus Brighton. And Notorious, honestly, thank you so much once again for supporting the stream, and actually, yeah, it's really, really appreciated. Thank you so much. Saka, Neto to Rodrigo and Gundogan for -4. Yeah, I think it's the similar logic here. I think Saka, Neto both have good games on paper, Vignesh, so I would not take that transfer -4. I think this is not the week to go for Rodrigo if you had a weak team. The reason why I went for Rodrigo myself, and I'll try to explain that a little bit brief, is because I didn't actually have a starting 11 last week, right? So if we look at my points last week, I had Andreas on the bench and I had Nico Williams. Both Andreas and Nico Williams have really terrible fixtures. So they're playing Tottenham and Arsenal this week. So that means I had a playing 10 this week to go with. And going for the long term, it made sense for me to go Rodrigo, because one thing I knew this week was that I needed to get into Rodrigo before the price rise. And because of that, I've had to go into dunk on Rodrigo a little bit early. And my plan really is to go for a Game Week 9 wildcard. So the idea of going for Dunk on Rodrigo is to capture the short-term upside of Rodrigo all the way until the United game. And potentially even, let's say, a transfer out in between that. Let's see if his minutes drop. Because a lot of people are looking at Sinistera, but I would say Rodrigo short-term is still super interesting. We'll see what happens, of course. Maybe his minutes will tailor off. But the short-term upside, I would say, of Everton, Brentford, Nottingham Forest was something I really liked when going for an 11th player and picking Rodrigo at a time where my team could still afford him. Because I'm assuming, let's say if Rodrigo does have a haul, and let's say Dunk, loses his clean sheet, then Rodrigo rises, and I'd be priced out of Rodrigo in the next week. And I don't really like making transfers until I have full information. So you always want to make transfers at the end, near the deadline, which you guys are doing now. Which is why I've gone into Rodrigo. But if you're in a situation where you're looking for one free transfer, I probably wouldn't just think about purely just going Rodrigo. And that's kind of how I would view the move. Ward to Alisson transfer. What do you think about team this week? Alisson, Trent, Cucurella, James, Cancelo, Walker, Salah. I think your team's good to go, mate. Ben Vlogs. People listen to me. Tony captain. I think Tony's a great differential captain, but I can't say no to Salah. Would you consider KDB since Pep said that he will rotate Haaland due to the games? I mean, absolutely, I would consider. I actually made a video on this earlier this week with the Gameweek 4 preview. I did mention that I'd like to go into KDB potentially, but I think Haaland is also someone who, coming off the bench, has done excellently. I mean, even if you look at his career in Dortmund, anytime he came off of an injury, anytime he was playing, diminished minutes, he could still score in very few moments. So I do actually like keeping Haaland, and the reason why I'm also thinking about doing that is because Kane was also suggested by Pep to be someone who could be potentially rotated over the next few fixtures, because I imagine Spurs will also want to give a bit of a big push for the Champions League too, and their goals are going to be mixed. Kane is going to have to be benched as well. Even KDB, he's going to have to be benched at some point. Maybe he starts all the games, but he's going to have less minutes. And for Haaland, maybe you're losing 40 to 50 minutes worth of gameplay. But the difference here is that Haaland is an attacker. He's not a defender. So you don't really have to worry about Haaland getting 60 minutes of game time. Instead, you're thinking about Haaland, his expected kind of goals per 90, and then projecting that back across to his expected minutes over the next few weeks. And I still actually might prefer saving the transfer on Haaland, because that's also value there in my team. But I can't I can't say no to someone going for KDB. Who to start between Andreas, Bailey, and De Silva? I would go for Bailey first, then De Silva, then Andreas. I'll check Twitter in a second. So removing Diaz just for Perisic, it doesn't seem worth it, High Rock. Not for this week, where they're playing versus Bournemouth. If you haven't got Salah, who's the best captain from KDB, Jesus, and Kane, I'd probably pick between Jesus and Kane. I'd probably back Jesus this week. Will Bailey start against West Ham? And if not, should I bring in Solly March, De Silva? I think Bailey does start against West Ham. And I don't like the options that you're bringing in place of him. So even if Bailey didn't get consistent minutes, I wouldn't waste the transfer on Solly March, De Silva, or Dewsbury Hall. 89 people only watching 19 likes. Exactly, guys. Thank you. If you could like the video, that would be really appreciated. Thank you so much, Diamond. Double Trent Alexander and Robbo. I mean, that's the way to go this week. That's the last week, I would say, to go for Robertson. I don't really like Robertson, Perisic. A lot of people suggested the move. I know Gronk, you're suggesting the move here. And a hit to fix the Leicester keepers. I can't see the move being good on paper. A hit to get out the Leicester keepers doesn't seem worth it. I'd roll the transfer. What's my team value? Let's have a look at that together, guys. 101.0 plus 0.1. So that's my team value. I'm going to quickly go back to Twitter for a second. I do apologize if I missed on any of the donations in the time being. I'm just going to quickly try and respond to some Twitter messages as we can. I wouldn't go for Joe Gomez, if I'm being honest. I just don't see how he stands in that team long term. I think Konate, it's probably around time for him to return to the team. He's probably much more preferred by Jurgen. Matip the same. How about Robbo to Saliba this week and then move Kane to Diaz to Salah to next week, thereby avoiding the -4. Yeah, so I've answered to this person that I'd rather captain Jesus over KDB, but personally, I don't think it's very far away. You know, between Kane, Jesus, and KDB, those are all great options. I just like the Jesus fixture at home. Jesus has always been very close, I would say, to scoring goals in every fixture, except for the Crystal Palace game, but he could have got 2 assists there. As far as KDB and Kane, though, I think Kane obviously has a great fixture on paper versus Nottingham Forest. I would say the Spurs is probably the worst attack out of the 3. And then KDB, I would say Crystal Palace have always defended extremely well versus City. So that's kind of what worries me. That guy, 4-3-3, no keeper, no free transfers. No keeper because you're double Leicester? Yeah, exactly. Fair enough. No free transfers. Look, I like the team on paper, with exception, I guess, to the Leeds, to the Leicester goalkeepers. But I think it's obviously worth not taking a hit. And yeah, good team on paper, that guy. FPL Diamond. So this is the team. We talked about going for KDB, right, and Tony. I can understand going for that move, I would say, in the future. I would say... Oh, actually, you've already gone for Tony, my bad. So, yeah, thinking about going to KDB here, I suppose, who would we lose potentially in the future? I'd probably think about just keeping Haaland, at least for this week, and then seeing what happens in the Nottingham Forest game. And then I'd probably move into KDB in the future. I still really like Haaland for now, though. I think he's not a move that I would focus on, because the rest of your team is very strong. Another person who's going to be subject to rotation is going to be Perisic. So I'd also think about dealing with Perisic, because, as I said, there's so much less upside for a defender compared to an attacker when it comes to rotation, because if Perisic doesn't start a game, he's already kind of screwed in a sense, right? As someone who can't get a clean sheet. And clean sheets are so quintessential to a defender because you get the bonus points. Whereas with Haaland, he can always come off the bench and score, even though, yes, you don't really want someone coming off the bench who's worth 11.7 million in your team. Is Saint Maximin viable? Yes, but I don't really like Saint Maximin versus the I don't like the short-term fixtures that Saint Maximin has. I think the horizon is better to think about Saint Maximin in the future. I also don't like the fact that Wilson's injured. I'd much prefer going into Saint Maximin later on. I'd even think about Almiron, if I'm being honest. Tony or Rodrigo transfer in. I think Tony's the better transfer this week, my friend. Trossard or Gross? I'd say Trossard. Okay, but next week when I have 2 free transfers, do you think it's worth removing Diaz for both Rodrigo and Perisic? High Rock, I absolutely do. And Perisic is probably... What you need to look about Perisic next week, though, is have a look at what's going to happen to whether he starts next week. But definitely Rodrigo is on the cards. You only have one free transfer this week. Should I transfer Neto out for Harrison or keep Neto for one more week? I would keep Neto for this week. You've already booked in the price decrease. You didn't get the Harrison price increase. And I think it makes sense to actually go with Neto because the fixture on paper is equally difficult. First of all, Wolves are playing at home and they're actually quite decent at home. And then Harrison's playing away at Brighton, which is one of the toughest grounds for Leeds to play. So I would actually save that transfer for the next week and then actually have a roll. Gronk, how are you doing? Joshua, I recommend you to go Harrison instead. I mean, that's fair enough, Diamond. But as I said, I just don't like Harrison at Brighton as a fixture. Trippier, Perisic, probably Trippier. Do you think Elliott is a good FPL option short term? Are we talking about Harvey Elliott from Liverpool? Honestly, I would say no, because I still think the Liverpool midfield is a bit weak. I haven't seen too many attacking opportunities from him. I also think Elliott's finishing is a little bit lackluster, so that's kind of what hurts me a little bit. We have 100 viewers, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys would like and also subscribe, that'd be really appreciated. I do make a lot of FPL videos during the week, particularly my cheat sheet series, which is where I review all the assets in FPL. And you can actually consult that as a good way to also see what transfers you'd like to make in the future too. As I'm kind of looking at descending and attacking options, ascending options week to week. You've just sold KDB. You sold KDB to buy Tony. I'm a little bit confused by that, Amen. Do you mean you got KDB and Tony? I presume you sold Haaland? Or did you really sell KDB? It'll be interesting to see what happens to Walker now upcoming games. Yeah, I think Walker's an interesting one because Sergio Gomez might play. We also need to see if actually Cancelo would ever get affected by minutes. The Madrid jersey looks good indeed. I'll be playing the Madrid jersey very, very shortly in a kickabout. Hopefully I don't get injured and I can be back next week with you guys. Harrison or Harrison if Rodrigo isn't affordable? Absolutely Harrison for sure. If I had money, I would have upgraded Williams to Saliba to rotate with Perisic. Yeah, that's actually a good suggestion, Diamond. Madison replacement? Probably Luis Diaz or Gundogan. Do you think Dunk is better, Walker or Perisic? Or if you could actually... Yeah, I think that's Madison replacement. I was going to say Zaha, but then obviously Zaha only makes sense next week and you need to transfer immediately. Do you think Dunk is better, Walker or Perisic? I don't think Dunk is better than Walker or Perisic. I think Perisic is better than Dunk. I think Dunk could match Walker potentially with rotation because I see Dunk starting all the games and maybe Walker could be benched in one of them. I'm wildcarding this week, Fran. Do you think Zinchenko is worth a punt or is Reece James too good to leave out? Reece James for me all day long versus Zinchenko. Ben Mee or Da Silva? Probably Ben Mee. I just don't like the Everton offense. Gundogan or Diaz for Gameweek 4? It's probably going to be Gundogan. Any chance you should look at my team in Discord? Don't know what to do. I'll actually have a look at Discord after I log off the stream. I'm going to leave the stream in around 20 minutes time. So that's going to be what's going to happen. Any chance you... sorry, can you check out my tweet from Twitter? Absolutely, I can check Twitter in a second. Bailey to Rodrigo for a hit. Absolutely not Elliott. I'd start Bailey. Thoughts on going with Salah as the only premium spreading the cash around. Oops, sorry, tongue-tied there. I do think that's actually an interesting play. Because obviously Salah's minutes are nailed. Liverpool does have a little bit of a minor fixture swing around that Chelsea window. So Salah, if you can kind of rock with a team, right, that has Salah, and maybe you wildcard game week 8/9, or you have Jesus as a second captain, then I can totally see the value of, let's say, if you were going to someone like Gundogan instead, and not going for Haaland, let's see if I was just playing around with what I would do if I had a more well-rounded team. I mean, I'd probably go for Tony, if I'm being honest. I'd probably would have upgraded Dunk back into an interesting option. So let's say that we're going for Perisic for now. And we have a rotation piece, because we probably do need a rotation piece. I'd probably actually go... I mean, I'm just thinking about an ideal team here that's Salah-less. So I might go for Sanchez, or you might go for Ederson if you wanted to spread the money around, right? So this is how you'd go around this team. You'd probably upgrade the midfielder potentially. I mean, I guess for now I'd keep Diaz, but I do like the Gundogan transfer in the future. Might be more interesting than Rodrigo. I think Martinelli is one to think about transferring, not necessarily this week, but definitely in the future. I just wonder if there's anything else I could do to beef this team up with the money that we have back in the bank. It's strange because I really like Rodrigo and Martinelli for now. And I'm not even sure pushing up these two players would be that interesting. Obviously, we have 8.0 options available in the midfield position, I'd probably think about keeping Martinelli. Just saving, I would probably save enough money in the bank so that I could move Martinelli to Odegaard in the future if Martinelli's minutes started to drop off. So that's one thing I'd think about. Look, ultimately, I think what's strange is the landscape of the 8.0 midfielders isn't particularly good. Maybe I would go into a Mitrovic structure and then drop Rodrigo as well going forwards. But Mitrovic still has terrible, terrible fixtures in the next few weeks. So that's why it doesn't seem to make too much sense. And he's not even that far off of Rodrigo. I think that's my main concern, really. How many... Are you going to back someone like Kulusevski over Rodrigo? Potentially you could. And then you have a lot more money in the bank. But I'm not sure if I actually like the the Salah 1 premium structure. I think I'm probably someone who's a little bit more fond of going for double premium for now. Fran, put Damsgaard on your watch list. He's an excellent acquisition. I mean, I need to see something from Damsgaard first before I put him on the cheat sheet. Damsgaard didn't do anything in Serie A last season, so I think we're slightly overrating what Damsgaard could potentially do. Thoughts on going... Yep, sorry. Having double up Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robbo. Think of James or Perisic to Robbo. Look, I don't see the reason to move out of Robbo this week. I think this is absolutely the week you have to start Robbo. And if you're not thinking about starting Robbo, I think you're actually, honestly, on the verge of crazy. I think this is the week to keep Robertson. I agree with Uploadium just below where he says he's going to sell Robertson next week. I don't like Robertson versus Newcastle. And just going forwards, I do think that until they get a midfielder, until some of the defenders come back from injury, that this Liverpool team is very, very weak on paper when it comes to how expensive they are as defensive options. You already have Sanchez as keepers. You get Saliba or Dunk to say... I would get Saliba over Dunk. Uploadium. Do you think Harry Kane will perform against Nottingham Forest? I think he will. Aluminium, how are you doing? Burn or Botman? I'd probably go for Botman. Cucurella out for Perisic or Dunk or Roll. Look, I prefer rolling in that situation. I think it's nice as a smaller YouTuber that you do deadline streams a little earlier than the big ones because it's hard to battle with them. Look, I mean, that's why I do the streams a bit earlier. Ultimately, I'm also playing a football game at 10:30, so I definitely wouldn't be able to make the deadline. But I really appreciate you guys being here, and thank you guys so much for joining us today for the deadline stream, or the pre-deadline stream even. Could you check? Yeah, I can absolutely check your Twitter, Notorious. Alright, Notorious. Can I ask you if you have one free transfer or two free transfers, or what the situation is for your team? I love the team on paper. It's pretty much... How would I say this? This is like one of the most optimal teams possible based on the algorithm, I think, previous to last week. So any kind of algorithm, any kind of FPL model would have said this is one of the best teams on paper. And I think it still is. Because when we're looking at Maddison and his timely injury, that's going to be fantastic for Cucurella this week. I think it's a great opportunity to bag that kind of Chelsea clean sheet. Ederson we've talked about as well. I think I prefer him to Walker and Diaz. And if I had the chance to revisit, I would definitely go for Saliba and then Ederson as my kind of centre-back pairing. But because I didn't have the, I guess, availability to do that, I've gone for Dunk instead in my team. But this team is a team that I would roll if I had one free transfer. If I had two free transfers, I would actually think about going into Saliba this week if I had this team Notorious. Otherwise, I think the team's perfect on paper. I'd think about maybe moving away from Cucurella or James going forwards if let's say the Chelsea defense still continued to hurt because the midfield is so weak for Chelsea. But that's the only thing I would think about short term. Otherwise, I think the team's great. We could maybe even think about a move away from Luis Diaz. But for now, I'm not super tempted on that. I do think if you can roll. If you have two free transfers, as I said, just go into Saliba. Because I much prefer Gabriel to Saliba as something to free up funds for your team than something like Archer to Stansfield to just provide another bench depth option. Going back to some other Twitter questions. Hey, Fran, as you know, you've made my moves already. Sorry, I've made my moves already, but who would you captain? I'd probably... Honestly, I'd captain Tony, Jesus, or De Bruyne. I probably would not captain Luis Diaz, and that's me as a Luis Diaz owner speaking. I think Jesus or Tony are the options I actually like the most. This is my gaming team, but in the next or 2 games, plan to sell Robo. What do you think is the best replacement? Definitely, um, I would say Perisic, even Trippier is an interesting option. But James, I think James is the best option if I'm being honest. But then Perisic or Trippier, it depends on your timeline. So Perisic, if we get news that he'll start the next week, then I think he's interesting. But I don't think Perisic will. So that means Perisic becomes an option in Game Week 6 for you. And it's the same sort of situation with Trippier too, where he has to play Liverpool. So for Perisic and Trippier, if you feel like you can keep Robertson versus Newcastle for whatever reason, then fair enough, keep Robertson versus Newcastle. But I like James on Game Week 5, and I like Perisic/Trippier on Game Week 6 potentially. Joel says, "Hey, Fran, thoughts on this team?" I like the team. I think Aronson's some transfer that you've probably been forced into because you owned Neto and you didn't have the cash to move down. I would say going forwards, I think I love this team. The rotation between Trippier and Andreas is great on paper, so you have that. I'd probably think about maybe focusing my moves around Aronson in the future once again, because I feel like he is slightly maybe overrated as an asset for what he's going to provide on paper. I think the underlying stats haven't necessarily backed him too much. And I know a lot of people were really interested in going for a Leeds midfield this week, but I think that might be the one small weakness in your team. And potentially Kulusevski, downgraded into someone else, could free up the funds to actually upgrade Aronson in the future. But definitely I would keep Aronson for the next week anyways, because he's playing versus Everton. And then as far as Kulusevski, he's probably going to continue starting. If we get any news that Kulusevski will be rotated though, I would definitely think about transferring him out, especially if he doesn't do well. Saliba instead of Gabriel, yeah, I agree. Christian says, "Good morning. Trippier, Rodrigo to bench for this week." You lean towards Trippier. That's interesting. Look, I would actually lean towards benching Rodrigo. I really am confident about Brighton's defense. But if you want to back Rodrigo because you think he's in super hot form, then I can't stop you from benching Trippier. But I do think Trippier has the better game on paper. So that's how I feel about that. You're gonna move Raya for Sanchez than Captain Jesus. Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a good move. But I mean, Raya for Sanchez in a week where they're playing Everton, I don't love that transfer. I don't love that transfer, to be honest. I'd probably save it for the next week. Should you get De Silva in for Bailey? I wouldn't do that. I think it's a waste of 2 free transfers. If I had 2 free transfers, I would do the exact same move that I suggested as well. I'd think about Gabriel to Saliba, right? So that frees up funds for your team. And that actually allows you to upgrade Bailey to someone quite good next week. I think it's Saliba or Stansfield once again. I'm going to go back to YouTube for a brief second. Would you start Gross or Saliba? I'd definitely start Saliba. Salah's EO will destroy people's rank if he does. Yeah, if he goes off, you don't have him. Agree with that, FPL Diamond. Very template team. The thing is, there's nothing wrong with the template. I think a lot of people stress this and make the point out. If you look at a lot of the analytics FC sort of type players, right, on Twitter, the people who actually back FPL models, try to play optimally, try to understand, the best way to play FPL, I guess in a safe, more slightly risk-averse way, then you'll actually notice that they have very template teams and they consistently do very well. And that's simply how FPL is going forwards, I think. I think you can definitely play differential. You can definitely be someone who goes with picks outside of the curve, goes with less interesting high EO assets, and you can do that. That's one way to play FPL. But I think definitely having a template team is not an incorrect way to play FPL. Eye test on Guedes looks good. Yes, he actually looks quite interesting. I do agree with you. But whether he's actually worth 6.0 for a Wolves team that isn't creating enough chances and goals, probably not. I don't have enough money to get Tony or any other good forwards. Thoughts on Mbumo? I really don't like Mbumo. I'm sorry. I think if you want to be that cheap on your team, I'd rather go a 5 back because there are more interesting 4.5 defenders than Mbumo. Dunk or Perisic? Could you please answer Perisic for me this week? You were dead set on Rodrigo ahead of Gross, but now you've reignited my niggling feeling Brighton will shut them out. Look, I've gone for Rodrigo in my team, fully expecting this to be a bad game week for Rodrigo on paper. And that's simply how I feel about that. Start De Silva, Everton, or Mitrovic versus Arsenal. I'd probably start De Silva. So you don't think Kostas Tsimikas will start this game week? Afraid that Robbo won't play? I don't think so, my friend. I don't think Robbo's been bad, actually, on paper. KDB or Haaland? Haaland for sure. Thoughts on switching out Mount for Sancho or Rashford this week? Yeah, you're a Mount owner who's been pretty... Look, I'd go for Rashford, honestly, if I had to go out of Mount. But I think this is still a great on-paper game week for Mount. Can't see the reason to move out of him. You don't have enough money to get Tony or any other good forward. Thoughts on Mbumo? I've answered that already. So, as I said, only a defender to consider. I wouldn't go for Mbumo. Should you Mitrovic out for Welbeck? Potentially, yes. Would you have Gross or Rodrigo to start? You skipped me on Twitter. I'll go back on Twitter in a second. I'd probably start Gross. Start Saliba or Rodrigo. I'd probably start Saliba. Can you check my team on Twitter? I will do, Kezi. Neto to Gross / Aronson. I'd roll. Would you rather have KDB or Haaland on a wild card? Look, I think gun to head, I'd probably pick KDB, but I'm someone who owns Haaland right now, and I wouldn't think about transferring Haaland out. I don't know if that helps answer your question, but the reason why I like wildcarding into KDB is because I'd probably stick with the 4-4-2 template, and by going to KDB, I would go into Tony this week, and Tony versus Everton for me seems like a gargantuan fixture. Mitrovic is going to bag versus Arsenal, no clean sheet, 3-2 Arsenal victory. I love your outrageous takes, Diamond. I mean, that's fair enough. I think Arsenal have been a very good defense. I think that actually might concede one. Welbeck or Mitrovic, Welbeck for the short term. Is Sanchez the best FPL keeper option? As a 4.5, absolutely, Zodiac. I think he might even be. KDB to Gross and Armstrong to Tony. I'm not going out of KDB to go into Tony. I'll tell you that right now. I'll have a look at Twitter for now, guys. Start Mbumo or Andreas Pereira? Mbumo. All right, let's go with the standing order. Hey, Fran, please give your thoughts on whom to bench and whom to transfer out. Are you asking for the bench on Game Week 5, or are you asking who to transfer out for Game Week 4? For Game Week 5, I mean. Transfers out. It's actually a tough situation here. I really love this team. I think potentially Diaz. Two free transfers, 0.5 in the bank. Okay, that's interesting. We can go out of Bailey. As I said, I think Raya's worth... I mean, look, I think I would take Sterling out this week, if I'm being honest. I'd probably upgrade Sterling and Bailey together and try to do that. Let me actually kind of calculate how much that would be. Just curious on... Because I don't actually know Sterling's current price, 9.9, and Bailey is 4.8. Okay. 14.7 to play with. So, I'd probably go with Gundo. We could also go Diaz, though, can't we? I think Diaz is a great game on paper. So if we go Diaz, we'd have 6 point... Man, honestly, I would go Diaz Rashford. I think I would go Diaz Rashford. Genuinely. I think that's the transfer to make. First of all, Rashford versus Southampton, fantastic fixture. And then Diaz versus Bournemouth, fantastic fixture. You'd get rid of Bailey, who's going to be a problem in your team long term, because you don't really want to be playing Bailey consistently. The fixtures drop off an absolute cliff for Aston Villa. And then by moving into Diaz and Rashford, you have some money in the bank and you can kind of play around with the defense in the future. And I'm just not seeing any value for Sterling for him to be worth as much money as he is. He's just not worth a 9.9 asset. There's just something about this Chelsea team where the attackers just don't get as involved as we think that they would on paper. Let's have a look at Smarth. You got 2.3 million in the bank and you brought in Perisic, so you take a -4 to take out one of the bench players. Taking a -4 to take out one of the bench players. No. Don't do that. Jamie says, have Sally been unable to get some research in this week? Is there any options you see in my two free transfers? Okay, let's see what the team would play like first. So we play Ramsdale, then we play a back 4, so we have 5. Then we actually play a midfield 3 at least, so we've got 8. And then we've got 10 with Haaland, Jesus. Okay, so the only transfers are really around Neto. And we have 0.5 in the bank. Interesting situation. Saliba Sanchez is one option that I think is crazy, but I think could work out. Saliba Sanchez is tempting, to say the least. Alternatively, you could just play... I've actually got a crazy move that I have on mind. So what about going into Fofana this week, playing Neto this week? So you have a playing 11 with Neto. You have Andreas covering on bench. You upgrade Nico Williams to Fofana. Then next week you have 2 free transfers once again to play around with. And then you have Fofana for a 4.4 option. But that's going really ahead of the curve. So that's the crazy move I have on paper. If you wanted to simply move out of Neto into a 5.8 option, the reason why I don't like that is because I'm just not backing any of those 5.8 options. Anything below 6.1 really. So... probably play Bailey over Aronson. ASM and Rodrigo seem like they're balling. I mean, ASM was really just that one fixture versus City, and I feel like a lot of teams played defensively differently versus Newcastle than City. City actually played quite wide and quite... I mean, sorry, they were very wide on... They're very narrow, actually, on defense, which actually allows for St. Maximin to exploit a lot of open space where the fullbacks traditionally are. But because the midfield... the fullbacks are so inverted for Man City, I think that's why St. Maximin had such a fantastic game. I just don't like how St. Maximin's next game is going to be Liverpool, where I think he'll actually have a tougher time. I know people are going to think, okay, matchup Trent is quite easy to deal with for St. Maximin, but just the way that Liverpool will defend is going to be quite different to City. So that's my concern there. I do like Rodrigo a bit more, and I think Rodrigo's the inverse. I think Rodrigo has a tougher game on paper in the next week. This week, and St. Maximin has a tougher game next week. I think I prefer Rodrigo. I think Rashford's a great option too. I don't like Cucurella this week, to be honest. I wouldn't go out of Trent this week. Let's start with Liam Harris. Hi, Fran. Looking at my team, I want to do Gundogan. He is rotation risk, but I think he's worth it. Because I think the upside is there. I'm going to quickly go back to some of the YouTube questions. Thank you, Zodiac. I hope you appreciated the stream. Jack says he's got 2 free transfers. Got Neto and Bailey. Can't afford Gross. Help. That's a tough situation. I think you've got to do a similar move where you've got to find some sort of money back from one of the other defenders or even the forwards so that you can actually upgrade Neto and Bailey sufficiently. Almiron, I guess, is an option too. This Arsenal defense will be exposed. They lack leadership during adversity, not getting top 4. Look, I think Saliba is such a huge upgrade. I can't agree with that. I actually think Arsenal are destined for top 4 this season. Josh Hall says, I need your help, Broski. I want Jack Harrison. Look, I'm not going to call anyone stupid for going Harrison. If you want to go Harrison, go Harrison. I don't think you're stupid for not going Rodrigo. That's crazy talk. Hassan, hello, how are you doing? Should you start Harrison or Bailey? I'd start Bailey. You quite like starting this week. Excellent differential. You back him this week. I mean, I agree, but Chelsea just don't attack enough for me for Sterling to ever be worth it. Yes, the Leicester defense is on paper one of the worst, but I don't see the real value in going out of Sterling this week. I mean, I see the real value in going out of Sterling this week so that you can actually upgrade Bailey, which is my consideration. And ultimately, I think every week someone's going to say Sterling's a differential, but what we've seen so far in terms of expected goal involvement, in terms of Chelsea's expected goals themselves, I just don't think is enough for Sterling to be a 9.9 option. Saliba Sanchez sounds good. I agree, Ahmed. Thoughts on Kane captain this week? I think he's a good captain. I prefer Jesus personally. Fran, what's your overall rank? I'm 397k right now. Just quickly show you. Yeah, 397k. 198 points. Terrible game week last week. Andreas sitting on the bench, that really hurt. Diaz coming off the bench, that really hurt. So yeah, that's kind of what happened last week for me. Will Ronaldo start today? I can't confirm. Solares. How's my Fab Analyst fan? Definitely helped me with the sheet countless of times. Rodrigo's your idea and my cheat code. I'm really happy you picked Rodrigo. He was actually the thumbnail for my Gameweek 3 cheat sheet, so I'm really happy people went Rodrigo because of it. Check my Twitter team, bro. You have Foden in the pick. Yeah, I'll have a look at Twitter now, guys. Happy you got Rodrigo though. Oh, okay. I love the team you have this week, Aaron. Let's have a look at Kezi. Opinions. Interesting team on paper. You've got Patterson and Stansfield at least, which is nice. All right, you've definitely got to sort out. I think you've got to, weirdly, you've got to get that triple city back in your team, I think. But maybe wildcard for me this week. What do we think of defense? Actually, I would consider going Fofana, right? Because if you go Nico Williams into Fofana, you could actually cover Perisic really well, because you'd have a Chelsea defender, and maybe if you don't you want if you want to go Jamesless, that's your best option, and I would say the money comes from going to Saliba. Heard a one transfer in the bank, one to get Perisic and Rigo by removing Diaz. I think I'd roll with this team. What do you think you should do with this team? So we're going to play back four, midfield three, and then, I guess Iverson's a problem, That's a little tough there. I don't really want to downgrade Mount this week, but then I also don't want to suggest a complete roll. We still don't have triple Arsenal in this team, so that's something to think about. Man, this is such a weird situation because I feel like you do actually want to spend that 0.4. Who's in... And then you can't get Fofana this week. And you still need to play... Saka to Martinelli. I think Saka to Martinelli, Iverson to Sanchez. Is what I would do. DNA, this is made a wildcard drop. This is my team without changes. Yeah, I can understand. Cash isn't great. Bailey isn't great. Gabriel, I'd probably downgrade him. Saka, I'd probably downgrade him. I probably wouldn't go gross on a wildcard. I don't really like gross that much. I'm going to quickly go through Twitter so I can go back to YouTube questions. Any changes you'd make? One transfer available, Royale out. I'd probably roll. I'd roll. I think we still haven't gotten good Doherty news, and I like the Emerson move. This with Haaland and Trippier, or with Kane and Perisic. Ooh, wildcard active. I think it's Haaland for me. Bailey to Harrison or Rodrigo. Two free transfers, could you advise? Yeah, so Neto's a bit of a problem. Morning, Fran. Here's my lineup. I feel like my midfield needs improving. Ideally, Bailey out. Harrison would... Yep, okay. I still like Bailey for this week. I think your backline makes sense. There's literally nothing I would touch. I would only maybe consider downgrading Zinchenko. And I would actually much rather play Bailey this week. I think he's just more offensive as a player than Da Silva. I think you're spending way too much money on your depth, so I wouldn't do that. I would try to downgrade some of the bench options so you can upgrade your starting 11. Because think about it, every week you're going to play versus people who have a much more expensive starting 11, and they're going to have a stronger team. This team here, lovely team on paper, no complaints. I mean, this literally looks like my team, so yeah, this is exactly my team. I would actually say, what do you think? Because that's my team. All right, so I'm actually going to end the stream very shortly, guys. I'm going to play Salah captain. I'm going to play Jesus vice. The team's exactly as it stands. 2 free transfers used, no hits taken. Let's see what happens going forwards. I think the key points to address is going to be Haaland, what to do with him. And potentially even, let's say, if I have the opportunity to downgrade Ramsdale. One thing I'll say about this team is it is kind of geared towards a Gameweek 8/9 wildcard, and we'll see what happens there. But that's as things stand for my team. Bench orders Andreas, Nico Williams, then Archer. And that's how I'm going to roll out this week. So thank you guys so much for joining the live stream. As far as general chat questions, Captain Kane or KDB, I like Kane a little bit more. The general points on who I like to, in terms of bench order this week, I would say I really like Bailey. I don't like Da Silva as much as Bailey, so I'd go Bailey, then Da Silva, then Andreas this week for bench questions. As far as Harrison or Rashford, I'd go for Rashford. I think Rashford has a fantastic week this week. A lot of people are thinking about going for Rodrigo, right? If you couldn't afford Rodrigo because of the price lock last night, Rashford for me is very, very interesting. Is KDB to Salah for this week worth it? I 100% think so, especially to get the Salah captaincy. I'll be checking Discord very quickly on the way to my football game, and I'll answer some questions there. But otherwise, I wish you guys a wonderful weekend, a wonderful week of fantasy, and I hope you guys take care. And please like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks, guys.